Okay. We're going to start in 1 minute. Just trying to give everyone a chance to log on. I know the computer traffic is quite intense these days. All right. So welcome everyone to a special edition of Mediation Matters. I was thinking about doing this presentation last week when a few of our members called and asked for some assistance with online technology. And so I thought, oh, well, let's put on a webinar and we'll have a group of myself and maybe 10 or 20 people. And it turns out that a lot of you are very interested in searching for information for the online mediation protocol. So I'm here to help you as the first of many presentations. So we have really just put this together with the hopes that we'll have lots of feedback and discussion between us as a membership and try to meet your needs going forward. So this is a first attempt to share sort of really the emergency measures that we're trying to put into place and support that we're trying to give to you to help you with online mediation and technology tips in trying times. So welcome. So really the first thing I wanted to say is that, you know, we do have to adapt. Like this beautiful butterfly will sort of transform. We're being asked to transform, and it may be uncomfortable to shift from an in-person practice primarily to a online dispute resolution practice. And there's a lot of difficulties and challenges with that, and I hope this presentation will help to answer some of those questions that you have. And so I first looked at the, hang on one sec, I just have to, oh, I guess that's what you do to put the next slide. So I saw this article that was really quite nice from John Paul Boyd, and it's, you know, there he's speaking to a couple of his colleagues and saying that we share a reasonable concern that remote meetings are not always as effective as in-person processes. However, not as effective doesn't mean they're ineffective. They are effective, although managing conferences and hearings remotely demands additional effort on the part of the mediator. And so this is what we're going to talk about today, and that was from slaw.ca, and that was just on the 20th of March, so very new stuff. Trying to figure out how to, there we go. Okay, and then I thought this was an article that came out last week as well from a company called CSD, and they wrote a really neat article called Toast, Landing Jelly Side Up, and I thought that was kind of a nice thing, a nice image for us all. I was sort of thinking we've been dropped in it, and so landing jelly side up, I think, is an optimistic outlook on how we're doing with this dramatic shift to online mediation services. And this company is talking about, you know, how regardless of what happens, even in the future, things will be a little different, and we can all sort of grow. Excuse me, that is not a COVID-19 cough. in a post-COVID world, they're saying that family law business models, if we embrace the technology that's there, we can actually have some shifts that are very positive for us all going forward. So when I was looking at what do we do, like how do we look at the standards for online mediation, and what do we have that's existing, and how can we draw on our existing standards of practice at the OIFM and sort of dovetail them with some ethical principles. And I found the National Center for for Technology and Dispute Resolution is a very highly regarded organization. And in fact, the Mediate BC, they have a very beautiful article called Mediating at a Distance, and they actually based their guidelines for their mediators in BC on these principles set out by the National Center for Technology and Dispute Resolution. So I thought we'd have a look at those, excuse me, and show you sort of what those principles are and how they work with what's already existing in our standards of practice at OIFM, and how we're all going to work through this. Okay. All right, so here's their 17 principles. So they've got 17 ethical principles in their initiative, and you can see that some of them are pieces that are directly in our standards of practice, and some we have to search and make sure that we've covered them in our care of our clients going forward. We're going to go through them. So the first ethical standard is protection from harm and security. So they're talking about making sure that within the dispute resolution process that there's no marginalization, that people who have the least access to justice are able to receive a fair process. And when I looked at this, I also included, being a family mediator, I've thought a lot about domestic violence and screening for domestic violence, and how we have to consider that and change that potentially. So I looked to our standards of practice and found this in our main standard, and then I'll share another one in the next slide from the policy on abuse. So the mediator shall, prior to every mediation and throughout the mediation, screen the participants for domestic violence and/or abuse or power imbalances. And that's directly from our standards of practice. And I wanted to highlight that. And one of the key things that pops out for me here is that every mediation, you need to screen throughout the mediation process. And I think for online processes that we need to focus even more keenly on the idea of online, consistent, thorough, ongoing screening of family mediation clients. So that's something that I'd like to highlight there. So this is from the OIFM policy on intimate partner violence and power imbalances. And so it says screening. So here's where we can really help ourselves and give ourselves some reassurance in the screening process, that we actually can use the online platform for conducting screening in these trying times. So the standard says conduct initial screening separately with the parties. This could be done in a variety of ways. For example, preliminary screening could take place with a brief telephone contact, but it must be supplemented by a face-to-face interview. Now, for OIFM purposes, immediately face-to-face means what I'm doing right now with you. If I was also seeing your face, that would qualify as a face-to-face interview, and you are meeting the standard if you use a platform that allows for face-to-face, even a virtual face-to-face meeting. So I just want to reassure everyone on that piece. And then the standard goes on to talk about the importance of screening separately, which we all know and understand that if screening is not done separately, someone who is experiencing abuse may be unwilling to reveal the presence of abuse when they're sitting next to the person with them. So that does not change in online mediation. You would do the screening interview at a separate time with a separate login for your clients to be interviewed separately. Okay, next screen, next. Okay, so online screening, what's the same and what's different? So when I was having a look at what we're doing in person and what we're doing online, I thought of it would be important to look at what's the same and what's different. the and I really did think about the increased importance of the use of pre-mediation screening tools. I'm not talking about an intake questionnaire. I'm talking about the addition of sort of a combined information gathering with some questions in the questionnaire that could elicit some responses, or just little drops of knowledge or bits of knowledge that you could follow up on in a personal one-on-one interview online, or just sort of give you some more information about the family. This is a screening technique that a lot of us who were trained by Dr. Barbara Landau already use. So it's a combination intake with a few screening questions in there. And I thought that that would actually have increased importance during this time, where we're able to actually email a form, have them fill it out and send it back, and give us sort of another touch point for looking at areas of concern that we really needed to focus in on. It is not in place of a screening tool. It's a pre-mediation screening tool, similar to a brief phone call, which is allowed for in our standards, that would give us another further touch point to make sure that we are, getting as many opportunities as possible to create rapport and develop the relationship, and really understand and know who our clients are and what it feels like for them coming into a mediation office, really in the online venue. It's no different than coming into a mediation office for the first time. There's still the presence of domestic violence and abuse that doesn't go away in online, and so we have to really be focusing on that. Number two is talking about development of rapport and trust. So that's a real focus, because if we're doing screening and we're doing it throughout the mediation process, we need to develop trust, and we need to develop a relationship with our clients that allows for them to have, to think that we're open-minded, that we're neutral, that we're in a position to have capacity to help them. So that's something I'll talk about a little later too, about developing rapport. Number three, I think a difference between, between online mediation and in-person mediation is, in-person mediation, you know who's there, right? You know who is in the room with you. You can see everyone, and there's a little bit of, like right now, you're seeing me here, and someone could be sitting on the couch and coaching me on what to say, and you wouldn't know that necessarily. And so awareness of the people in the room is something that is, a consideration, and it can be a question. It can be a simple process design where you normalize and say, I'm just wondering who else is in the room with you, and are they, who are they, and is there an opportunity for you to have a private space? So it's something where some transparency and conversation is really helpful in that area. And then you have some decisions to make about the process. How do you feel about mediation with clients logging on through the same computer? Last week, I had a conversation with a couple of people, and one of them said that, they insisted that the connection be separate. And others said, well, the clients are living together. There's, a low level of conflict between the family and the parents, so they're comfortable with using online through the same computer. So there'd be a person sitting next to me, for example. So you have to design the process for both the family that you're dealing with, the situation, and also for your comfort. What are some of your ethical principles going to be going forward? And then there's decisions about how to use breakout spaces, and that can be really scary, right? If you're not used to doing online webinars or presentations, then it can be, it can be difficult to know how to use that technology to create a waiting room, a separate space for clients to wait, and is that secure? And I have just said to people who've called this week, just use what you're comfortable with. And if you need to have a breakout space and you can't manage it on the online dispute resolution platform, then fall back to something you do know. Log off for a few minutes, call the people, talk to them on just on the phone if that's something that is useful for that moment. So really adapt to how you're managing the online platform and also the comfort level of your clients too. And I swear I don't have COVID-19. I have an asthma cough these days. Okay, the next one is talking about being transparent about the limitations of technology to assist you in picking up nonverbal cues. So, you know, this is, I sent out an article last week and I talked about this is one of the biggest areas of criticism for online mediation, that, well, how can we see how we're feeling, and there's not emotion available to be seen online. And I would just say that this is a place for honesty, a place for, you know, talking to your clients and saying, I may not be able to see you tapping your toe. And if tapping your toe is a way that you show extreme discomfort, then we've got to think of a different way for us to be able to connect in this online world while we're all having to live in it, to help us through. So ask for clarification, questions, checking in. I think these are all really important common sense tips for us to think about. Is just, you know, you don't have to be perfectly technologically polished to be able to do this. You go in, you log in, you be real about what it is that you find the limitations are and how you work together to get around those at this time. My sixth tip is, or difference, is thorough intake and frequent checking in can assist you to meet the standards for screening. So I'm just saying that, you know, the intake process being as thorough as possible and frequent checking in with your clients, and just really, when you've got those spidey senses in a mediation room, you check those out the same way as you would if you're online. You stop, you pause, you use the tool that you have in the best way you can, or you switch to another tool to check and make sure everyone's okay. And I guess I've talked about number 7 throughout, talking about process design, talking about designing the process to be comfortable for your clients and for you. And this is brand new for so many of us, and you need to feel comfortable in using this online format as well. And if we're going to adapt and serve in in this difficult time we find ourselves in. And so I guess I should say a little something about questions. I've got our program manager of child protection mediation, Louise Vandenbosch, on the call. So I'm inviting you to use the chat, and she's going to monitor it and ask questions. And I'll try to leave some time at the end for questions as well. I might have said at the beginning, we're doing this a second time. We've had an overwhelming response to this webinar, over 200 people. So I'm also recording so that people are able to pick up the information. Okay, so I'll let Louise do that and go to the next slide. Okay, this is the next ethical principle from the National Center for Technology and Dispute Resolution. They talk about accessibility. And I picked up on this in this piece, I thought, about cultural differences between jurisdictions, as well as access to resources. So, and the next slide, I'll just show you. These are sort of my tips about adapting to provide accessibility to your clients. So thinking about individuals residing in rural or remote areas where internet access is inconsistent or even unavailable. So it's something really that, you know, I think I'm very guilty of living in Toronto, thinking that everyone has internet, and you know, becoming the ED of the provincial organization, very quickly realized that this is a province without internet everywhere, and there can be some really places of spotty internet, and so we've got to think about the ways it would work. Using the telephone can be a good backup if no online meeting platforms are available. The exception is face-to-face screening, because we do have a technology requirement for face-to-face screening. However, I think if you're having an emergent need to complete a mediation, there's no way to get a face-to-face meeting. I talked to someone just earlier, and we were talking about sending photos and screenshots, and thinking about creative ways to be able to sort of meet that requirement. And I think in these cases, if you have something that's an emergency like that, you should check in with us, and we'll think about guidelines for that particular situation. Okay, and then sometimes you have to think about an individual's request for camera versus non-camera participation. And its importance with screening as well. So if someone's really uncomfortable being on camera, maybe they could have camera participation for the screening portion, and then agree to not have camera participation for the balance of the mediation or for parts of the mediation. But think about how to accommodate that, because it's comfort level. It's when people feel comfortable, they're more able to speak freely and come up with solutions. If they're worried about seeing their face in the corner of a screen all the time, that can take away focus that you need them to have for the mediation. So I think accommodation of individuals' request to their comfort level is something that we can all consider. And then think about how your clients feel. Like what does it feel like coming to mediation is just so stressful, and it's the time of their lives. I can't even imagine what's happening in families who are going through not only the stress of separation, but the separation in this time where everything's closing, services aren't available, and we're trying to adapt and serve. And now we're telling them to log on to Zoom, and they've never even used a camera on their computer, or maybe they don't really have one. And I find this even for webinars when I'm doing Speakers Corner. Some speakers are very used to this, and others have some anxiety, and they need a check-in call or a login the day before, a week before, just a little test. So offer to have that check-in with them to reduce the anxiety of logging in on the day of mediation. So it's not their first time, and they can check that their computer works and their camera works if they want it to, and their microphone and all that other good stuff. Also, another thing to provide accessibility is thinking about biological breaks, just like you would in person. Think about, we're going to mediate for 2 hours, and what if we take a break at 1 hour in, and that can be the biological break, just to get especially if someone's not as comfortable with being online, to allow them to breathe and relax as much as possible, or as much as needed. And if the technology is letting you down, switch to something else. Okay, competence. And so I don't know, I see some questions going on. Louise, you can use your microphone and turn it on to interject if you feel like the question should be answered right now. Otherwise I can, okay, go ahead.
Marianne, a couple of people are asking, are the slides going to be available afterwards?
You know what, I right now they're sort of a work in progress, because I'm also doing this presentation tomorrow, and you can imagine I was just even making some changes. So can I hold that question till after they're done? Okay, thanks. Yeah. All right, so competence. So another ethical principle of the National Center for Technology and Dispute Resolution is competence. So here we go. After I told you can switch and everything can be fine and you're going to be all right, here I am telling you one of the ethical principles is competence. So this just, it's not limited to knowing the technical knowledge, but also knowing about language, culture, dispute resolution principles. But I think for this presentation, what we're looking at when we're thinking about competence is thinking about, how am I going to, do this platform? How am I going to be okay? So here's some technology tools for you that could really help you, and just a few little tips. Now, we have limited time, so I could probably go on for an hour just about this piece, and if needed, we will do. I think that this is probably the piece that's one of the most worrisome. And the other good thing to know is a platform called Zoom. So we're on Zoom right now. It's one of the more popular platforms. There's also GoToMeetings. Google Hangouts Meeting is another one that's a meeting version, and Skype. Those are sort of four popular ones there's some other ones too, but these are the four ones that I knew about, and I'm sure there's other good platforms. And if people have other platforms to share, please do over the course of the next many weeks. I think really we're going to be working together as a membership to try to increase all of our knowledge about what we can do on technology. So the first thing to do is to shop for technology that fits your practice needs. Most platforms do offer a free trial. The other thing is that most platforms right now, especially, I'm getting all sorts of emails to say they're doing a free online demonstration of their own platform. So Zoom is doing that regularly. And I'm sure the others are as well, but I seem to be on the Zoom email list. The second thing is get comfortable with your platform. I used to use Adobe Connect, and I was comfortable with that. And then we switched to Zoom for a few reasons at OAFM. And I'm more comfortable on it now because I've practiced. And, at this time when we're all, sort of maintaining the social distancing requirements, we can connect with our friends and family on Zoom and see if we can try things out on them that in a casual way that allow us to feel, to have just that familiarity with the platform. Because when you don't know what you're doing on the technology piece, it can be harder to focus on your really good skills as a family mediator. So getting comfortable with the platform can be really helpful for you. The use of secure, excuse me, the secure Wi-Fi is important. So sometimes you could be in a place, I know my personal meeting office has terrible Wi-Fi. It's in an old historic home. The Wi-Fi is awful. So if I was doing this there, I would use a personal hotspot, which can increase the reliability of the connection. And it's also very secure. If you're, not logged onto your own Wi-Fi, a personal hotspot can give you a more degree of security and privacy than logging onto a public Wi-Fi at Starbucks, for example. Another tip is remember to turn off your email and message notifications so you're not disturbed. So for example, before I came on this, I turned off my email notifications, and my iMessage comes to this computer too, and also phone calls come. So that can be very loud when you're online. So turning those off can be really helpful and a smart idea if you don't want to be distracted. Another thing is when you're sharing a screen, like what I'm doing now is I'm sharing a screen, but I'm sharing actually only a document. I'm not showing my entire desktop to you because maybe there's something about, what I have to do about my mortgage or my bank or something on the screen, and that's personal information that you don't want your clients to see, or even worse, other client files. So you really want to be careful about sharing your screen, only sharing documents and you will have the choice on all platforms that I've looked at of sharing a document only, as opposed to sharing your entire desktop. Wear pants. And I say, you can have no shoes, but you want to make sure, if in case you had to stand up and get something, that you're not wearing pajama bottoms. I think when my daughter had recently been doing interviewing for getting a real job after university, there were lots of online interviews, and one of her friends did an interview and was doing very well, and for some reason they asked her to stand up, and she was wearing PJs, and she got caught out. So I'm not sure of the ethics of all that, but anyway. All right. Okay, practical tools. Okay, so these are some things that I found that can be really helpful to assist us in the online practice. So one of the first ones is called Cam Scanner, and it turns your cell phone into a scanner. So you're able to take a scan of something at your office and quickly send that and share it to others in a secure PDF form or JPEG form. So it's called Cam Scanner. It's an online app, and it's for iPhones and for the other type of phone, which I can't remember the name of. I'll remember it later. And then sometimes people are asking questions about how do you get clients to pay when you're online? It's, often, when we're in person, we just, they write a check, or you've got a Square or Stripe or Pay, like you've got a little thing, a little document or a little chip to read people's things, and it can be very easy. Android phone, thank you, Rachel, Android. So that's Android or iPhone for cam scanner. So those payment portals can be useful. Canada Post made it on the list of practical tools because people can mail you things, right? People can still mail. We are still receiving mail, so that's good. I think I might have skipped over online bank transfer. So they can e-transfer you money. You can actually also request money on e-transfer. I don't know if some of you have seen that. You can actually request for funds instead of waiting for them to respond to your requests. You can ask them to send you money using your online banking service. And then thinking about things like how to sign documents. How do you sign your retainer contract? You can sign virtually. That's not against the standards of practice. So you can have your clients sign the agreement to mediate in a virtual way. There's a company called HelloSign that will send your documents for signing. Some of you may have used that already, and it's quite effective. Doodle poll can be helpful if you're trying to organize, say, a child protection mediation where there's multiple parties and you need to get availability from a number of people. That can be useful to arrange meetings and send out some available dates, and you're able to pick meetings that way. And then thinking about storage of documents and how to transfer big files to people if they're not going to go by email. Thinking about using Dropbox to share documents. Google Drive, it's another option. Google Drive, I think, if someone could correct me, but I think Google Drive is a little less secure than Dropbox, but I think that's based on, I don't know, folklore. So someone could correct me on that one. Okay, and so another ethical principle from the Center for Technology and Dispute Resolution is confidentiality. So that's right in our standards as well. So they're talking about the development and the implementation of ODR systems should maintain confidentiality there. And Louise, you'll tell me what someone's saying it's something about Dropbox. So, okay, so we're talking about how to maintain confidentiality online. So I will go to the next slide. So here we go. So you can ask clients up front, like, make sure, do they have a private space to log in from? It wouldn't be such a great thing to organize a mediation meeting and their only Wi-Fi connection is, sort of at the local coffee shop and there's lots of people around. It can be very difficult to maintain confidentiality that way for them. For you, for the other person logging in. It's a consideration. Again, I talk about who's in the room. A spin around of camera, someone had given me that idea. But, I guess everyone could duck if they were not wanting to be seen online. And it can interfere with establishing rapport, right? If you're supposed to be going in as a trusting group and trying to, be working as a little team together over the course of their mediation and you can think about that as sort of a threat to trust and establishing rapport. One way around that could be sort of making it your standard practice. You could say, hey, you know what, I'm this is what I normally do. I know it may sound silly to you, but I just want to make sure that you're the only person in the room, and this is what I always do, and sort of go about it that way if that makes you feel better about starting the mediation and developing rapport. And then thinking about the choice of your online platform. So Zoom is one of the only platforms that I know of. Now others may give information, which would be great, but it appears to meet, it's approved by the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers, and so it meets the personal information and the personal health information requirements, and I've included a link there to that document. But so the professional level of Zoom, so there's different levels of Zoom, and you have to log on to Zoom and it'll show you sort of a menu of options. So you can choose the professional level if, especially if you are a member of an organization that has a requirement. The OAFM does not have a specific requirement for an online platform, but we all should be cognizant of especially the personal information Act. We're not bound by the Personal Health Information and Privacy Act, but meeting that standard would be an excellent thing. And then from the OAFM standards of practice, here we see that the mediator shall maintain confidentiality in the storage and dispersal of notes, records, and files, paper and electronic, and other provisions of the Privacy Act. So this is holding us to that act as well. Louise, will you tell me if there's questions that are related to that? I think she's okay.
Yes, I will. Actually, I just sent out a couple of things for everybody. One is there's a blog there which does an independent evaluation of Dropbox versus Google Drive. By and large, it says they're neck and neck, but anyway, people can read that themselves. And then the other is that I know I got a notification today, Owl Practice is getting a video therapy platform ready. They say it'll be ready for a few weeks, but it meets all of the security requirements that anyone's having to do in terms of confidential practice. So I've just put those links out. Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, Louise. Excellent. Okay, so back to the ethical standards of the National Center for Dispute and Technology Resolution, empowerment. So this is talking about ODR systems and processes are designed and implemented in a way that to seek to enable growth and positive change for individuals, relationships, systems, and society. And by doing so, they increase access to justice and an enhancement of choices to have effective decision-making opportunities. Actually, this slide and talking about enhancement of choice is probably the most optimistic slide here, right? This is, you know, if we think about this shift as an enhancement of the choice of individuals now, you know, now we have less choice, but going forward, it could be that, you know, some of us really, really like online, or we find a niche group of clients that find this a very, very useful and effective way of meeting. Something to think about. So how do we empower our clients? Hang on. The 6 C's. So I came up with the 6 C's. So I thought, okay, so choice. We give choice of how to participate, increasing options. The length and timing of meetings can be more fluid. I had a client call me this week and said, you know, I'm okay with meeting online, but, you know, can we meet for a shorter time? I think 2 hours is just too long. And because you don't have to drive there, pay for parking, you know, arrive at your office, they don't have to do the same. An hour meeting is absolutely doable. And it can be that you can be more flexible in the delivery of your meeting style because that you're meeting online. Number 2 is checking in. I've talked about this throughout, and we're talking about the more frequent monitoring of how your clients are feeling. It can be very easy to sort of go through things really quickly and forget, you know, to check in, and there's maybe you're sharing a document on the page and someone wants to see what's up in section 4, and you know, you're all the way at section 6. Checking in before moving the screen can be really helpful. It takes time and patience, but this is something that is providing empowerment, a feeling of non-helplessness, if that's a word, of your client, or empowering them to feel like they're still in control of the decision making that they're engaging in, even though this process could be quite different for them and really foreign. Cheering on, anyone who knows me knows this is one of my favorite things to do, is cheering on it and encouraging that they're doing okay, that, you know, that this is new, acknowledgement that they're, you know, they've logged on well, things are, you know, their connection's good, their camera's good, they've got their microphone on, they've done a good job of getting into the process, and, you know, that they've been flexible in their thinking to expand to allow for this to happen, because mediation, at the very heart of it, is this beautiful voluntary process. And now with COVID-19, we're asking people, can you meet with me online? For a great many of us are having to do online now. What does it feel like? Are they, you know, good there? And so encouragement that they are, you know, able to use this is something that's, I think we can't forget to do in our mediations. And then creativity, expansion of thinking. And this is related not to solutions for families, but what are the options of online meetings? Maybe you use Zoom, but your client loves GoToMeeting and they'd like to use that process. Well, see if you can't adapt and use that process if that's something they feel super comfortable with, and you can get yourself comfortable with it as well. Number 5, coffee. So even though you're meeting virtually, I know in a lot of our mediation offices, we offer a cup of coffee or some water or some snacks. And think about making sure that you give your clients time to get their cup of coffee, to fill their cup, to make sure they have enough to eat, so that they can continue on in the virtual meeting space. And then comfort. Think about adjusting your background, adjusting the sound, making sure there's no, I was on the Zoom call with one of our board members, and she had noticed some beeping, and it was a construction noise beeping. And so I had to make sure I closed the windows, and it was very loud to her on the other end, but very quiet for me here. So making sure that you adjust the sound visuals and make sure that your clients feel comfortable coming into your virtual office, because that's where they are. They're in your sort of space at the moment. And then empowerment through the standards of practice. I had a look and thought, this is self-determination. When we're talking about being empowered and having the ability to make choice directly from the OIFM standards of practice, the mediator shall assist the parties to make informed decisions, recognizing that self-determination is a fundamental principle of mediation. So they're there in your room, and you're still encouraging this idea of choice, creativity, cheering on, and making sure that they're able to feel that, and they're able to still to meet the expectation that we look at self-determination. Okay, I think someone raised their hand there, but I went back. Equality and honesty. So back to the National Center, they talk about using a system design process that enables silenced or marginalized voices to be heard, and that the honesty part is talking about data being gathered and presented in ways to ensure it's not misrepresented or presented out of context. So I'll show you what I came up with for that. Next. Okay, so providing equality and honesty. So the first thing is to share the space, to make sure that you give time and space to hear all the voices on the platform. Some people may be less inclined to talk on an online format. It's, if someone like me was going into a mediation where I'm always doing something like this every week, I feel comfortable here, and I feel like I'm talking to our members, and I feel really good about that connection. Some people may feel less inclined to talk in an online format, and they may be quite intimidated by being online. And so checking in with them to provide an equitable space can be a really good idea. And if it's not working, you adapt the process. You process design. You make sure that both you feel comfortable and your clients feel comfortable where you are in the space that you're inhabiting for that mediation. If it's not working, you can check to change to a different format. And then thinking about honesty, looking at online platforms, it can actually be quite helpful in providing some honesty or even just some clarity over what's happening. Maybe you share a document in real time and you're working on it together, a memorandum, and they can see you typing. As long as you can type reasonably well. People always make fun of me in my typing. I'm very lumpy and go back and forth and spell things wrong all the time. But that's life, and some people are very fast, and that they may be more comfortable sharing a document and working on it that way. But getting the wording right is done in real time. I read another article. One of our members, Nigel McLeod, just wrote an article, and one of the tips in there was talking about the importance of progress notes after an online mediation. And what about doing progress notes just as you go? Start, opening up a document, start typing and sharing at the time, so that you use it as a virtual whiteboard. You get it right, and you make sure that there's understanding during the meeting, that's very clear. Actually, it can be I think a real bonus to one of the upsides for sure. Another thing to look at in terms of providing equality and the correct space is that there's a lot of settings on your platform. So it depends on how you set up a meeting, and the online platform will be able to give you some tips about this, but make sure that it's only you who can share documents if that's what you want, or that you understand another person, if you make them a co-host, could also share a document, and is that okay? Or would you prefer to keep control over document sharing? And just really making sure that you understand the space that you're working in. What time is it? Okay, we're doing okay. Okay, fairness and transparency. So back to the National Center for Tech and Dispute Resolution Guidelines, they're saying that we need to make sure we take all reasonable efforts to be sure of the transparent, the true purposes, risks, and legal obligations of the process. So this is talking about a general online dispute resolution, but I think the idea of fairness and transparency is something that we should look at too. And so meeting the needs for fairness and transparency. Now this question, I think, will be one of the biggest ones for us, right? It's like the first line: consider making changes to your retainer contract to reflect the nature of the meeting. What should those be? And what should it look like? Do you just add, a line to say that, the clients acknowledge that this meeting will be held online, and what do you do about recording? I'd like this to be a work in progress for us, this piece, to work together to share with each other what we've changed in our retainer contract. Do we need to change anything? Is there something wrong with the ones we currently have? Does it prevent us from, really having the fairness and transparency about the process just because it's moved online? So with your permission and with your participation, I really would like to work on this further, because this is something I think that's of top of mind to a lot of us. And what do you do if your mediation is closed? What will you do about recording? So a lot of platforms, I'm recording this webinar so I can share it, and I've let everyone know that I'm doing that. But what would you do during a mediation session? If it's a closed mediation, are recordings equal to notes? And I've done a little research, and some say that's what the case is, that a recording is simply a digital note of the meeting. And some say it's better not to record a closed session because it could be used or requested at and maybe it wouldn't survive the closed nature of your retainer contract if it was called upon by a higher authority. So thinking about, are you going to record the meetings? What if someone else records the meeting? What if someone sets up a camera and records the meeting that's taking part, a participant? What are you going to say about that? How are you going to ensure that the confidentiality is met in that situation? And then thinking about storage and data policies, and that you put in, the people agree to how you're going to work. Some people in their retainer contracts talk about using Dropbox or another, Google Drive or the other pieces, the other ways to store things, iCloud, etc. Some people specifically say that in their retainer contracts. But let's work together on this. I think this is very emergent for us, and I'm looking forward to having some more guidelines on this for us all to think about over the coming weeks and months. And then, of course, from the OIFM standards of practice, we know that right now we're meeting the requirement as long as we explain the mediation process clearly before they sign the agreement to mediate, and that you don't proceed without a signed agreement to mediate. So I think that we're all going to meet that standard of practice regardless of the online versus in-person meetings. Okay, so back to National Center. They talk about impartiality and neutrality, which those familiar words for us as mediators. And we're talking about privilege in process, like accounting for conditions that could give one person privilege, and here they talk about repeat players having more, I guess, comfort level with an online process, and could that sort of work against someone who is just new to a process? And I think we've spoken about that quite a bit earlier on, talking about comfort level of the people that are participating with the platform. And then talking about neutrality, which is right in our standards, and I'll go to that now. So any conflicts of interest are transparent. And so we think about being impartial and neutral online. And, you know, I talk about just that these concepts extend naturally from an in-person setting, that your impartiality it remains a huge piece of who you are as a mediator. How you express that online will be very similar to how you did it in your office. And then talking about being mindful of tech savvy clients who could have advantages over people who are less savvy with online platforms. And then from the OIFM standards of practice, we talk about the having to disclose, so the mediator, you know, a previous contact. So the mediator must disclose any known or prior involvement with a party, either directly or through her partners or associates, and mediation may only proceed following such disclosure with the expressed written consent of all the parties. So that's how we can meet that standard online. And then back to another ethical principle, we talk about informed participation. Now this slide, you'll notice, is, and I almost stroked out these things, but I thought I'll stay true to what the National Center says. So they talk about a non-voluntary process. So this is not obviously applicable for us, but these are their ethical standards for informed participation. And I'll just go quickly over those because the last one does not apply to us. And then I'm talking here about informed participation adapting online. So the first thing is it remains voluntary, and how you participate remains voluntary too. So if you're, you know, if you have a client or family who really doesn't want to meet online, then you have to, you know, shift and accept and say, okay, well, how are things going to go in the interim? When can we meet again with, and are you okay to wait till, you know, hopefully this passes soon and we can all get back to having an increased sort of choice of options, so we can say, well, yeah, okay, we'll meet online in the future when things are better and social distancing has hopefully solved the problem, and we're all healthy and well. And talking about, I see lots of questions coming in, so I'm assuming, Louise, you'll jump in.
I've been getting them. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, and then talking about how you'll conduct your meetings, that's important. We talked about that in retainer contract language. And then expectations for future meetings. Would you have some meetings in person in some circumstances, or, you know, when the social distancing requirement is lifted, then would we switch to in-person meetings, and how would that shift be for them, and how would you work through it? And then from the standards of practice, highlight the mediator's specific procedures and practices. This is in the retainer contract, including the right of any party to request an individual joint or shuttle meeting. So this is sort of giving empowerment to your clients, and highlighting our responsibility to include in our retainer contract how we mediate, and how we will accommodate an individual request for a joint or shuttle meeting. And then innovation and integration, again, back to the ethical standards or ethical principles. We talk about technology serving the dispute resolution process as seamlessly as possible. So this, again, you know, we're saying, hey, this innovation and integration has to be seamless for people if we want it to be efficient, and increase peace and trust and access to justice. So this is saying we've got to be good at this. So let's get good at it together, and let's look at a few things that might help right now. The first thing is be patient with yourself and with your clients. The second tip could be, what about co-mediating right now? What if I was comfortable mediating online, but my, you know, a colleague down the street wasn't, and they wanted to co-mediate with me? that could be okay. Or what about asking for consent to be an observer on a colleague's online file with consent, obviously? And practice, practice, practice. Like, get comfortable. It's the online platforms are designed for the user, and the one that works best for you is the one that you should use, and give them each a try and see how it goes. And then I'm talking about having documents ready to share. I talked about that point earlier, instead of sharing a whole screen. So that's a bit of a privacy concern. Legal obligation, talking about, again, back to the ethical principles. I'm talking about upholding the laws of the relevant jurisdictions. And then I'm looking at that and saying, okay, well, we need to make sure that we maintain our standard of practice, and talk to our clients about, we're in the online world, but, there's still the obligation of all of us to talk to our clients, to talk about the availability of independent legal advice for each spouse, and the advisability of obtaining independent legal advice prior to signing the mediated agreement. And so here you'll find that some lawyers will actually assist clients virtually as well. There's got to be half people on the call will be lawyers as well, and they can talk about us over the coming weeks and months about how to work online. I know that separation agreements, for example, have to be signed in person, but us working together virtually to get them at least to the stage where things are almost ready to go for the time being. You can send out retainer contracts by PDF. We talked earlier about HelloSign, just one platform that helps you sign documents for signing. I think another one's called DocuSign there. And then I wanted to let you know, or sort of talk about this. There's a whole suggested practice guidelines for family mediators, which is Mediate BC, adopted in 2012, quite a long time ago, actually, almost 8 years ago. For them, they're quite ahead of the times, I think. Anyway, they adopted their standards from the National Center for Technology and Dispute Resolution, and their guidelines are based on the ethical principles. So if you want to have a look at those two, I've got that and can definitely share it with you. And then finally, just talking about the fact that this is not the only time that we're going to reach out to be with you and to help guide us through this time and this really dramatic shift to online mediation. And we want to know what you need. And so if you email me and let me know what was helpful on this webinar and what you'd like to focus on for the next one, that would really help me in designing the information for you. And we just want you to know that, you've got this, you're going to get through it. This is a time for change and growth. And I know that, through everything I've seen in the last week and a half, that how far we've come together in supporting each other, that, we do have this as a community, and our response to adapt and respond is really encouraging and warms my heart for sure. And thank you all for coming on here. I'm going to turn now to Louise to see if there's questions here.
I don't think there's any questions other than one I answered, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to let people know we haven't sent out an announcement yet, but on April 2nd at 2 p.m. there's going to be a webinar put on by Michael Saney, and that's called Co-Parenting in these difficult times, I think, or something like that. But it's around how do you co-parent during this COVID-19 crisis. So we'll be sending information out about that as well.
Yeah, and we're working on also an emergency credit response, like how to plan financially, both for your clients and for yourselves, with the Credit Counseling Society of Ontario. I think that date is April 8th. I'd have to check, but information will be coming out shortly. So we're trying to get as many experts around to talk to you about what's going on. So, okay, so questions.
So Marianne, here's a couple of questions from Nicole. She says, if we have already started mediating with a couple and are now moving to an online platform, do you, Marianne, suggest that we add an addendum to the agreement to mediate, that the parties agree to online mediation, or would an email from them with their consent suffice?
You know, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I would have to ask a lawyer to say, like, what's the best thing to do. I mean, you know, I think it depends on, you know, to be very, very sure that everything's okay, you could add an addendum to your mediation contract. I mean, it's not like, you know, you do have an email trail asking for permission, getting permission. They do log on. You're not logging on to their living room without consent. I feel like there's a level of comfort in the online world enough that, you know, a simple email verification could be okay. But I would hate to answer that question in the wrong way.
Somebody did answer, Tanya, and she said she would do a new contract just in case, and because it's under different circumstances.
It's probably a good idea to do a different contract. Yeah.
There's a question from Wes. He's again asking whether the specific information is going to be available in, I guess, a format that can be downloaded.
Oh, the information that I just shared?
That you've just presented. Yeah.
Let me check with we've done it so quickly, and I've created it with not a lot of input yet. So let me check with the board and the president and make sure of what information they'd like me to share, so that I can be helpful to you, you know, in the future. And hi, Wes in Alberta.
Mm-hmm. And one other question is, for courses scheduled soon, should we be teaching them online?
Oh, that's a very good question. So we did write to all of the trainers and gave them like the freedom. Actually, the accreditation committee extended all creative options, and every course can be completed online, with you know, a hope that people will have sort of a creative look at role play, you know, including deferral of role play to like a date in the future, so that role play can still be experienced in person, because that, you know, there's a lot of opinion from very established trainers that role play in person is something that's highly desirable. But we did extend to the maximum flexibility. All courses can be delivered online and will still qualify for accreditation purposes. There's a question in the chat about liability and insurance issues. So I've got a call out to LMS ProLink, who's one of our main insurers, to ask about liability. I believe we've asked this before and we're okay, but I'm waiting for an official answer for LMS ProLink. And
I got an email from ProLink yesterday, and they said that yes, that online is covered.
Okay, good. From LMS ProLink?
Yeah. So it's for OASW or members. So I'm assuming it would be for
okay.
Both. But, anyway, they did send an email saying they're getting inundated with phone calls, and they just sent out an email.
Okay, and there's I think there's two sections of questions. There's the question and answer section, Louise, and then there's the Zoom webinar chat. So I just want to make sure. It looks like LM has had a question. Has there been an increase in parents not allowing children to transfer between homes given the C-19 withholding access? I was asked this question late last week, and I said, just, you know, use normal precaution. Like, I mean, I haven't heard anything. I got one question. I said, you know, use normal precautions, washing hands and that sort of thing. I mean, the idea of a child being with one parent, you know, emotionally for however many weeks or months this is going to go on, doesn't seem like in the child's best interest to withhold the child from that parent. But I haven't heard it come up other than that one question. And my answer was, make sure you wash your hands and, you know, follow the protocols of social distancing if there's, you know, a family member, if there's suspicion or of COVID-19 or international travel. Louise, can you see the questions and the question and answers? I think we've got...
Yes, I've got the question and answers. We've gone through them I think somebody, Vicky just reminded Michael Saney's April 1st at 2 o'clock. Somebody said that ProLink is covered for social workers. I'm not sure if it's covered for others. Someone else said, or Michael Saney said, he will talk about whether or not child access should be considered as an essential travel. So that's it for the questions. And on the chat line, there was one around, this is a child protection mediation case where the Children's Aid Society is closed. So no ongoing visits are happening. And is there an alternative being given to parents other than phone calls? I don't know. I would imagine from my understanding, I'm also do child protection mediation from the agencies I'm working with and from colleagues who I know are managers in child welfare. Most of them are working from home. They're working remotely and they're trying to figure out how to provide service to families. And I don't know if they have all the answers right now. So I don't know if there's any further information about that. I'd say check with your individual child welfare agency.
Okay. And then I just wanted to clarify the webinar on media parenting with Michael Saney is April 1st, not April 2nd. And Michael confirms he's going to talk about whether or not child access should be considered as essential travel. So excellent. We have an expert to answer that question. So I'm really pleased and looking forward to that one. So that's just coming up next week, April 2nd. So that's good.
No, April 1st.
I said it again.
I know. April 1st.
April
at
1st. April Fool's Day. We will have that webinar. So it's I think it's well past 2 now, and I know it's people will need to go and get onto their other platforms and presentations and all sorts of good things. So I just wanted to thank everyone very, very much for your interest and enthusiasm in coming to this presentation. Knowing it won't be the last one, we'll talk again very, very soon. Please email me with information that you'd like me to cover or areas you'd really like me to focus on from this presentation. I'd be more than happy to do that. And we are here for you. We're going to continue to present to you by webinar in this way. And I can't wait to see you all again and elbow bump you in the future. I'm gonna really cherish those moments when we finally do get them again. I'm not gonna take the physical in-person contact for granted in the future. So looking very, very much forward to that. So be well, be safe. Thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.